Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, some potentially unsuspecting lineup combinations for the Timberwolves this year. Players who may be asked to play multiple roles based on what we know from their performances last year, but some surprising lineup combinations the Timberwolves had last season that could help dictate what head coach Chris Finch is doing this year. We'll look at the roster, some of the versatility of some of the bench pieces, and all that today on the show. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Happy Thursday, everybody, and a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen each and every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms, from Apple to Google, Spotify to Odyssey. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On T Wolves. Don't forget the T. And also at my account, which is at Beecken, and that's with two B's, two E's, CKEN. Today on the show, I want to dive a little bit into some lineup data. I want to look at the roster as it currently stands, some likely rotations, minutes allocations. We'll look a little bit at some lineup data from last year to try and give us an idea for how Chris Finch might cobble together his rotation this year. Some guys who may be asked to play multiple roles. I want to look a little bit at what Taurean Prince did last year from a lineup perspective, because I think it's interesting. What role will Karl-Anthony play as a newcomer on the Timberwolves? So we're going to do all that here today. We're going to close the week actually with a really special show on Friday. We're scheduled to have Antonio Daniels, the former longtime NBA player, longtime San Antonio Spur, current announcer for the New Orleans Pelicans TV broadcast. He's the play-by-play announcer there. Antonio does some work with Locked On NBA. He's going to be on our show for Friday. I'm going to talk to him a little bit about Rudy Gobert and the impact that Gobert will have on the Timberwolves this year, what he thinks that will mean for the Wolves. Run a few questions past him related to that on Friday's show. So be sure to tune back in on Friday to make Locked On Wolves your first listen Friday morning. Okay, let's go ahead and get into some of this. I guess, dive into the lineup a bit more. I alluded to this first part a little bit on Wednesday's show. As much as, we talk about, three rotation players were traded in the Gobert trade. That's true. It's still not quite the roster turnover as it's been billed as. Now, the last couple of weeks, it seems like they're signing guy after guy after guy after guy. Austin Rivers, Bryn Forbes, Kyle Anderson, in reverse order, I guess. But it's like, it just kind of feels like this cascade of, man, they're just adding guys to the roster in Summer League and, two-way contract, AJ Lawson and all this stuff. You look at the top 11 minutes, 11 players last year in terms of minutes played on the Wolves roster. They're only missing 3 of them: number 4, number 5, and number 7. Now, obviously, that's still a lot of minutes, right? 3 of your top 7 is significant. The top 7 rotation guys, that matters. I get that. I'm not at all saying it's not. It doesn't matter. I just think that the roster turnover has suddenly been oversold a little bit, because you're bringing in an all-NBA guy. You're trading out 3 rotation guys, 2 starters. But Malik Beasley was 4th on this team in minutes. Jared Vanderbilt was 5th, and Patrick Beverley was 7th over the course of the season. You're still returning 4 of your top 7 and 8 of your top 11 minutes getters last year for the Wolves. Towns, Edwards, Russell were your top 3. Jaden McDaniels was 6, Naz Reid 8, Taurean Prince 9, Jalen Noel 10, and Jordan McLaughlin 11. And you could go a little deeper. Nate Knight at 13 is back as well. So, yes, there is some turnover on this roster, but it's really more how the starting lineup will shake out and then how that next line of defense shakes out. The first wave of substitutions. I talked, again, this part a little bit on Wednesday about how basically Gobert and Kyle Anderson are going to fill in for the Vanderbilt minutes, and also probably take minutes away from Naz Reid, almost certainly. Bryn Forbes and Austin Rivers are going to try and fill some of the Malik Beasley, Patrick Beverley minutes. Functionally, right? Like, some of those minutes have to go to Forbes and Rivers, but Jalen Noel will be the one to fill the scoring of Malik Beasley, the perimeter shooting of Malik Beasley, whereas Rivers will be relied upon to, he's certainly not the defender that Patrick Beverley is, but could he provide some size, activity in the backcourt, to try and kind of backfill what the Wolves would be missing from Patrick Beverley. So yes, there's a lot of turnover. Yes, there's 2 starters being replaced. Yes, there's 3 rotation guys being replaced, but you're only missing 3 of your top 11 guys in terms of minutes played last year. There are teams that have greater roster turnover than the Wolves do, so most certainly this year. So what I want to do next is I want to look at Taurean Prince, lineups with Taurean Prince, what he was asked to do, and what might he be asked to do in the upcoming season. And then also look at Kyle Anderson as a newcomer to the Timberwolves and in the context of what he might bring to the team. Who's going to be playing the backup 4 minutes? How big are these lineups that the Wolves are going to play? I mean, like, is Jaden McDaniels really playing the 3, Anthony Edwards playing the 2? And then, is it clearly Towns and Gobert in the front court? Who's backing them up at those roles? What could that front court rotation look like? We talked a little backcourt rotation on Wednesday. Let's talk some front court rotation here today. So we're going to do that next. First, let's talk about our friends over at Built Bar. If you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you are absolutely depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. Guess what? There's a new flavor. Delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. That's right. Built has done it again. Let me introduce you to your new favorite, cookie dough chunk puffs. Have a light and chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, and of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. And I can confirm this. I had my first cookie dough chunk puff the other day, earlier this week, and it was absolutely phenomenal. Legit real cookie dough on top of the 100% real chocolate. It doesn't taste at all like you're eating anything that's remotely healthy for you, but it is. It's all the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of actually making it. Plus, again, it is healthy for you. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories. Plus, they have a whopping 15 grams of protein in them. Don't walk, run to built.com to snag a box for you and the family. It'll be the perfect treat, or you can find a really good hiding place and simply hoard them for yourself. Like all Built Bars, the new cookie dough chunk puff is covered in 100% real chocolate. That means they're healthy and they're tasty. Chocolate covered cookie dough with a light, fluffy texture. Delicious. What's great about Built is that all of their bars are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. You're going to love the new cookie dough chunk puff. Whether you need a snack for your workout, a late night treat, or just need to grab a quick bite, Built is the perfect protein bar, and they taste better than a candy bar. Ditch the calories, ditch the fat, and ditch the sugar. Grab yourself a Built Bar. Go to Built.com. Use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. Again, that's our promo code, the one I use all the time. Promo code LOCKED15 at Built.com to get 15% off your order. All right, let's talk some of these Taurean Prince lineups that the Timberwolves rolled out there last year. And I really, what I did is I went to NBA.com or NBA.com/stats, and I looked up all Timberwolves 5-man lineups of Taurean Prince that played at least 20 minutes together. And there were, I don't know, roughly 20 or so. Again, 5-man lineups with Taurean Prince that played at least 20 minutes together. The top 5 of them, top 4 of them have Taurean Prince at the 4. Now, looking at last year's, so Basketball Reference says this thing where they break out a percentage of a player's minutes estimated at a certain position. It's not foolproof. It's not 100% accurate, but it's a pretty good representation of how many minutes a player plays at a certain position. Taurean Prince played, according to Basketball Reference, 45% of his minutes last season at the power forward spot at the 4, 53% at the 3, or the small forward spot. The top 4 Taurean Prince lineups had him playing the 4 last year. Number 1, which was a crazy plus 63.8, was a Jordan McLaughlin-led bench lineup with Jalen Noel at the 2, Malik Beasley at the 3, and Taurean Prince at the 4, and Towns at the 5. So a very, very small lineup. The next lineup on the list, which was a plus 39.7, the exact same lineup, but with Naz Reid on the floor instead of Karl-Anthony Towns. So again, a very small lineup. The third best lineup was a 2-point guard lineup with D'Angelo Russell and Jordan McLaughlin in the backcourt, Malik Beasley at the 3, Taurean Prince at the 4, Naz Reid at the 5. The fourth lineup was again quite small. This one just has Anthony Edwards. So it's McLaughlin at the point, Beasley and Edwards, Beasley at the 2, Edwards at the 3, Taurean Prince at the 4, and Naz Reid at the 5. So interestingly, 3 of them had Naz Reid playing center. All 4 of them had Taurean Prince at the 4. His 5th best lineup was basically him with not basically, it was him with the starters. And he did start a couple of games at one point in the season, but it was just him instead of Patrick Beverley. So D'Lo, Anthony Edwards at the 2, Prince at the 3, Vando at the 4, and Towns at the 5 was the 5th best Taurean Prince lineup. And then as you go through it, his 6th best also had him at the 4. And it starts we start to mix in some of those lineups where he played the 3. However, I think it's partly at this stage in his career, he's not quite the perimeter defender he was earlier in his career. He's still fine. That's part of it. And then also the Wolves just simply, um, ironically, they were pretty good when they went small last year. They just lost enough on the boards that it only worked against certain teams. I say ironically because now they're going to be absolutely massive, and we'll talk about that in a second. But Prince was really good as a 4 last year. He is big enough to hold his own against most 4s, and most 4s aren't posting up at this stage in the NBA anyway. Like there just aren't 4s trying to post up Taurean Prince. He's quick enough to guard them on the perimeter. He's versatile, long enough, quick enough to guard switches on the perimeter, to guard 4s that put the ball on the floor. And offensively, he can do really anything. I mean, he's not a dynamic offensive player, but he has the ability to score from multiple places on the floor. We even saw him create a little, put the ball on the floor with the second unit last season. Prince is just a valuable kind of Swiss Army knife type player to have on the team. Can guard 2s, 3s, and 4s. Can shoot the 3. Can put the ball on the floor a little bit. He's not a strict 3-and-D guy. He's also not really outstanding at anything. He's just fairly well-rounded. Obviously has experience, is a good team defensive player, and is a valuable player to have in the rotation. So what is his role this season? And what does the addition of Kyle Anderson mean for Taurean Prince's role? I thought, go back to late in the season, I didn't think Taurean Prince would be back, or the first part of the offseason. I didn't think he'd be back on the team this year. I knew that the players liked having him. I knew the coaches liked having him. I knew that there were a lot of positive things about having Taurean Prince in the locker room. I just didn't think it was likely he'd be back because I thought they'd look for somebody who could bring a little bit more to the table. Again, maybe had more of an area of expertise versus being well-rounded. Well, Kyle Anderson is that guy because he is better defensively, and he is better with the ball in his hands when called upon offensively. Again, not an offensive juggernaut by any means, but Kyle Anderson can score in his slow-mo way a little bit more effectively than Taurean Prince can. Obviously, Prince is the better three-point shooter, but all that to say, they are similar players in that they're 4s that also can play the 3, but they're very different in how they go about their business. And that's why I think this front court rotation is going to be so fascinating to watch this season for the Wolves, because there's so much flexibility. The starting lineup is almost certainly going to be D'Angelo Russell, Anthony Edwards at the 2, Jaden McDaniels at the 3, Karl-Anthony Towns at the 4, and Rudy Gobert at the 5. And already right there, you have a massive lineup. Obviously, Edwards primarily played the 3 the last couple years. Jaden McDaniels played a lot more 3 last year, but was almost exclusively a 4 as a rookie and played some 4 last year too. And now you have this absolutely long, everybody in the starting lineup with a wingspan of at least 6'9" or greater. Everyone in the starting lineup standing 6'4" or taller. The second line is very versatile. Jordan McLaughlin, obviously point guard. Jalen Noel can play some point. He's your backup at the 2. Taurean Prince, I have him slotted in as your backup 3. Kyle Anderson at the 4. And then obviously Towns or Gobert, one of them almost always will be on the floor, as Chris Finch will certainly stagger his lineups. You've got Naz Reid and Nate Knight as backups at the 4 and the 5. There's a ton of size there. Throw out McLaughlin and Noel. Everybody else, Prince is a good size for a 3. Anderson is a pretty good size for the 4. He's maybe a little smaller than some 4s, but this lineup has versatility because you have scorers like Noel and Anderson. I'd put in that category. You have shooters like Noel and Prince. You have guys that are pretty average or worse from beyond the arc in Jordan McLaughlin and Kyle Anderson, but they can both score at the rim in their own way, both distribute. And then, of course, you can play really big with Towns and Gobert. You could play big with Naz and Towns or Naz and Gobert. You could up your rebounding with Nate Knight at the 4. I just think there's so many different options there. So I'm going to what I want to do next is talk about what I think will be the rotation to start the season, which of course, like if we're being honest, it doesn't really matter what the rotation is on October 21st or whatever the opening night's going to be, Remember last year, the opening night rotation, I'll remind the listeners what that was last season for the Wolves. It's not what it ended up being at the end of the year. So we'll do that here next. And then I'll give some brief predictions on what I think sitting here right now on July 28th, what I think the starting lineup starting lineup, which I already mentioned, but also the rotation will look like on opening night this next season. Let me take you all the way back to October 20th of last year, which at this point was only somehow still only 9 months away, which is crazy to think about. But anyway, last October 20th, the Timberwolves were hosting the Houston Rockets, who were expected to be terrible. They were terrible. One of the reasons I struggled to remember Jalen Green playing against the Wolves too much last year, when I did Locked On Rockets for a Monday show with Jackson Gatlin over at Locked On Rockets, was because the Wolves and Rockets played on opening night and only played 3 times since then. So Jalen Green had a very quiet rookie debut against the Wolves last year, shooting 4 of 14 in that game, by the way. But the Wolves starting lineup last year on opening night: D'Angelo Russell, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Karl-Anthony Towns. Sounds familiar, right? Who is the fifth member of the starting lineup last year on opening night? Oh, wait. I would have guessed it. Josh Okogie was in the starting lineup on opening night last year. Top minutes player off the bench, minutes getter off the bench, Malik Beasley, no surprise. Jordan McLaughlin was actually next because Patrick Beverley didn't play. He had the suspension due to pushing Chris Paul in the playoffs the year prior. So Jordan McLaughlin, so I guess that's kind of you could throw that out, I guess. And then Naz Reid, Torian Prince played 16 minutes. Jared Vanderbilt actually did play 15 minutes off the bench. Then you had a bunch of garbage time minutes, which includes Jalen Noel. The next night out against the New Orleans Pelicans, which was actually 3 days later, October 23rd, the Wolves easily beat the Pelicans, but still only scored 96 points. Same starting lineup with Josh Okogie. And if Beverley played in this game, which meant Jordan McLaughlin only played 12 minutes, Jared Vanderbilt only played 12 minutes, Prince played 15, not in the rotation, Jalen Noel. So as the season wore on, obviously Jared Vanderbilt, less than a month into the season, ended up in the starting lineup. Patrick Beverley ended up in the starting lineup. Jaden McDaniels moved to the bench. Okogie eventually fell out of the rotation entirely. And then Jalen Noel ended up as fixture in the rotation. There were a few games here and there. Torian Prince didn't play at times last year. Jordan McLaughlin was in and out of the lineup, in and out of the rotation plenty of times. So whatever the rotation looks like opening night is going to be vastly different from where it ends up once this team hopefully gets the playoffs next spring, next April, right? Um, Sitting here right now, though, my prediction for what I think the rotation will look like: the starting lineup I already mentioned, D'Lo, Ant, Jaden McDaniels, Karl-Anthony Towns, and Rudy Gobert is going to be your starting lineup. I do think on most nights, Jordan McLaughlin will play 12 to 14 minutes. I think we'll see some McLaughlin Russell together in the backcourt, although I think the preference will be to play Jalen Noel at times with D'Angelo Russell in the backcourt. Noel, I went through some of this lineup data on Wednesday's show. Noel played well with McLaughlin last year as well. I think Jalen Noel is going to be your top minutes getter off the bench for this team. They'll find a way to get him on the floor. If McDaniels is in foul trouble, which is want to happen, certainly, um, I think we'll see Edwards back at the 3, and we'll see Noel at the 2. I think we'll see a lot of that this year. I think that will be, if McDaniels gets into foul trouble and or Edwards, Noel is going to be the guy that has to step in and play those minutes and be effective offensively. You're not going to rely on Taurean Prince. You're not going to rely on, Austin Rivers, Bryn Forbes to do that. If there's foul trouble, Jalen Noel will be the guy that's leaned upon. In terms of the biggest minutes getter in the front court, it's going to be Kyle Anderson. I'm thinking that Jalen Noel is probably in the 18 to probably more like 20 minutes a game. Kyle Anderson's probably 18 minutes a game off the bench, give or take. And then Taurean Prince is probably next. I think those are your first 3 guys off the bench: Noel, Prince, and Anderson. And I'd probably put them in order: Noel first in minutes, then Anderson, then Prince. With, again, flexibility, being able to keep Towns or Gobert on the floor at almost all times. I think Naz is a 10-minute-a-game guy, and sub Knight for Naz. Nate Knight gets those Naz minutes depending on matchups. If you need rebounding, if you need physicality, then Nate Knight might be your guy instead of Naz Reid. Again, I think in almost every scenario, Towns or Gobert will be on the floor. So I don't think Naz Reid and Nate Knight are playing a ton at the 5. I think they're playing a lot with either Towns or Gobert over the course of a game. Jordan McLaughlin, again, I think is more of a 10, 12 minutes a game guy. I think we could see some Jalen Noel just straight playing some backup point guard. If Edwards and McDaniels are healthy, not in foul trouble, playing well, we could see Noel get some run at the backup point, depending on matchups and allowing allowing D'Angelo Russell to get a rest. It's an excuse, a way to get Jalen Noel on the floor. Jordan McLaughlin's very good. Noel's just simply a more dynamic player, a better scorer, and can distribute the basketball, take care of the basketball decently well. I don't think Austin Rivers and Bryn Forbes, the veteran additions, are in the regular lineup. I don't think they're in the top 10 in this rotation, barring injury, foul trouble, etc. They're both functional. They can both run an offense. They're both essentially twos that can play the one. In Rivers' case, he can guard some threes because of his size. Forbes is really a two in a point guard's body, can run some offense, not a great defender, but a good catch and shoot guy. I think that they're both going to get some opportunities here and there just because of the way that the season typically does shake out. But Bryn Forbes and Austin Rivers are not in your rotation on opening night. I just don't think that they will be. Also, no Nate Knight, obviously no Wendell Moore Jr. in the opening night rotation. But those guys will all be important parts of this rotation over the course of the season, to be sure. Okay, I mentioned this at the top of the show. On Friday, we're going to have Antonio Daniels, he of many years with the San Antonio Spurs, longtime NBA player, NBA champion, and of course the the color commentator. I think I said play-by-play earlier. Color commentator for the New Orleans Pelicans TV broadcast. We'll have Antonio on Friday's show talking about Rudy Gobert, the addition to the Timberwolves. I want to know how he thinks Rudy's going to fit with the Wolves. If he thinks the offensive or defensive fit will be a bit of more of a learning curve, which one will be more difficult at first for the Wolves to figure out, for Chris Finch to figure out. And then also as somebody who covers a team that's certainly, with a healthy Zion Williamson, thinks they can rival the Wolves in the Western Conference, a team that thinks they can at least get into the play-in in the Pelicans. How does somebody who covers a rival team view the Timberwolves now with Rudy Gobert, this new look Timberwolves squad in the context of the Western Conference? I'd like to get his thoughts on that on Friday's show. So be sure to tune into that. A big thank you for those of you that do make this show your first listen each and every day. A reminder that Locked On Wolves is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. A reminder, you can make your second listen the Locked On NBA show. You can get up to date on the latest news and rumors in the league in just 30 minutes every day with Locked On NBA, Monday through Friday. Locked On NBA, your daily NBA update in just 30 minutes. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.